Welcome back to AJC and the Web Devs. I jumped the gun and hit stream right when Dev dropped off for some reason, but he'll be back any second now. We're talking about MCP today, and Dev is coming online right now. MCP, I will probably say MPC a lot, but MCP is the correct thing. Sorry, I hit literally go live right when you were like, wait.
Yeah, it bugs me every time. Every time I hit login on StreamYard, it just immediately kicks me out, like no warning at all.
That's funny.
At the
Oh
very
yeah, we
least,
were
I would
gonna
expect it
attach
to open a
your
login pop-up instead of like throwing everything that I was. Anyways,
yeah. I just
the
remember we were actually
StreamYard
gonna
makes me
stream
weird.
from your channel as well. I don't know if we can do that now. We've already gone live.
Yeah, that's why I was logging in. That's what I'm setting up right now.
Okay, cool. So hang tight, people. If you aren't able to do it, just oh, it looks like you're able to
All right, we're good.
do it. Let me check your YouTube real quick to see if it's going. So how you been, man? How's the new job treating you?
It's pretty good. I'm liking the new job. It's only been 2 days, but uh, it's an exciting move. It's the first time that I'm getting to work with a team that super understands things like event sourcing and domain driven design. So that's probably what I'm excited for the most. Like these are things that I've always wanted to bring into my projects, but uh, like I only had this kind of uh, leadership or autonomy in kind of like my side projects and not really like my work projects a lot, and it's really hard to get buy-in on things that people don't fully understand.
Yeah, and can you tell me how is it pronounced?
Zolvio.
Okay, so it's like a Z, but it's spelled with an X.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is deliver APIs that matter.
It's I don't know if their website is like actually fully up to date with or like it's fully represents what they do. But then
I'm
like
trying to get
I was brought
the right
into
link.
so I was brought to like help on or to work on like a very specific project. So I actually haven't uh, learned too much about like the entire company and what everyone in general does. Um, so far my exposure is just that hey, we're this is a team that uh, that works really closely. So they have worked in the past with uh, like Apollo team and even StoreDB team. So like they directly get clients from these dev tool companies as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of their history, like doing a lot of GraphQL and now event sourcing stuff. The GraphQL Super API thing, I haven't really actually heard too much about that since I've joined. Like that's a little disconnected from what I do. It's like just a consulting company in general. It's very similar to my last place.
Okay. Very cool. Is that Supergraph? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm the Zolvio, the company. So it's just a consulting company. The Supergraph stuff, I don't know much about that.
Okay, I want to say because you said Super API, but I think you meant Supergraph. Maybe
Did I
I'm
say
wrong.
Super API?
I'm just googling around now. So let's see. This is not super important, but I always get nerd sniped by GraphQL. So
Yeah.
yeah. It looks like it says how Zovio drives Supergraph adoption with this is an Apollo blog post. So yeah, this is what you're talking about. Looks like we got some people in the stream. What's up, guys? Thanks for joining.
What is up?
Yeah, here's a link for people who are curious. No, that's cool that you're doing work with Apollo. I did.
Yeah, I'm not working with
GraphQL.
Apollo. I'm honestly just trying to see if we can avoid GraphQL, but if that ends up not being the case, then no problems. I guess we are going to need.
Yeah, I meant you, like the company, not you.
The company, yes, yeah. Yeah. The company has a history of working with GraphQL and Apollo for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to hear how that goes as you kind of get more spun up and more into it. Today though, we're talking about MCP. Now, I was joking with Dev. I'll probably accidentally say MPC a bunch because it sounds like NPC. So I have to remember it's like ICP. Insane Clown Posse.
Yes, that's a good reference point.
Yeah, and you would also actually, last time you were on, we were talking about you had like this secret AI project you're doing at your old company. So it sounds like you probably moved on from that entirely now.
Yeah, now it's more of like a personal ambition to build that thing as a side project.
Okay,
So now I
cool.
guess it's
Yeah.
also doesn't have to be secret anymore.
Oh, great. Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about too much, but I'm only bringing that up because you had mentioned seeing
Mhm.
MCP and being like, oh, this could be cool for this project that I'm building. And I had first seen MCP back when it was announced. It's really new. It was only announced
Yeah.
back in last November, so it hasn't even been 6 months. And
Mhm.
I'm building my own AI thing, auto show. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. It's like a pluggable way to connect LLMs to all this different crap and different tools and different resources and data sources. But I had already kind of spent, at that point, 6 months now, at this point, like a year building out basically my own just node Fastify server that does all those connections
Yeah.
and figures it all out. So I would have had to basically rip all that out and start totally from scratch to adopt NCP. And then I built this tutorial. I'm very glad that I did not try and do that because I definitely made the right decision. But I see how it's incredibly useful as like a protocol because it's something that's standardized that anyone can kind of plug into. So kind of what's been your thoughts just kind of seeing it out in the Twitter hype sphere and everyone talking about it?
Yeah, I first of all, yeah, and I think uh, so I was the first time I got introduced to MCP, it was around the same time that uh, Swix's AI engineer YouTube channel, they published a workshop that some guy from Anthropic did
Right, I
for
shared that
MCP.
with you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you shared that with
Yeah.
me, of course.
Yeah.
So that was right after like I found what MCP was, and watching that entire workshop gave me a lot of context that if I missed, like I wouldn't have gotten the entire point of MCP. And I feel like a lot of people that talk about MCP don't really get the full context of why it
Wait,
exists, where it came
you're saying
from.
people on Twitter are talking out of their ass about new tech?
I know,
Shocking.
right? It's so hard to imagine. Yeah, but it's like it really shows that this was designed after like a long period of collaboration between all the different people who are trying to build the AI applications or AI agents and really trying to find the core primitives uh, that kind of drive everything. So like there's a lot of people that are just saying just use a REST API or just use hypermedia and what else. Like I don't think any of them quite uh, like fulfill everything that AI driven applications really need. And the other thing is that people focus a lot on tools, which makes sense because that's kind of the core way you expose things to a model. But MCP is kind of like a little more than that. It's not just a server for a model to use, it's a server for an AI application to use, not an AI model. And that kind of like already makes it more than like you actually need to start building an AI application with a specific use case uh, to really start to be able to see the utility of every different part of MCP and not just like uh, a way to standardize tool calling, which is like how most people are treating it. But yeah, it's something that I've been super interested in. Uh, the thing that I'm trying to build like on the side, it's very much like fully aligned with, or it's kind of like it has to be basically built on top of something like MCP. But yeah, we can get more into detail about that later. But yeah, I definitely want to talk about that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think I see where people are coming from when they say
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, why not just build a REST API? Because that's like
Yeah.
I said, that's kind of what I did for
Mm-hmm.
auto show. But they're just thinking like in their own specific narrow use case, which
Mm-hmm.
is like this is trying to solve a problem for the entire ecosystem, which is a
Right.
very
Yeah.
different thing. It's more about like they're trying to like give us like HTTP for LLMs, like something that
Mm-hmm.
we can all use. And you can build like a massive, massive ecosystem around, which I think
Yeah.
is cool. I'm still not sure how useful it will be to me individually as a
Mm-hmm.
programmer. But I'm open to kind of getting deeper and deeper into it, and we'll probably, if we want, we could do a whole part 2 on this, because where we're gonna get to in my tutorials, like barely to like the absolute basics. But
yeah,
yeah,
it's
anything
also
else you
really
want?
nice seeing people like Dax and SST team and Kenzie Dodds and David Kramer like kind of go all in on MCP and spend a bunch of time like upgrade their own things. Like Kent has just completely transitioned over. Like, hey, websites and web applications are not going to be needed anymore. Everything is going to be an MCP server, and it's like it's the position that I really wanted to take 2 months ago, but I was too scared to. And now I'm seeing Ken, like someone as big as Kenzie Dodds go fully in that direction, and it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I've been seeing Kent tweeting about it as well, and he was like way in the weeds with like OAuth flows and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just like, go Kent,
Yeah, literally reminds me of Swix 2 years ago.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's honestly, over just the last year, this kind of slow progression of watching the web community like fully
Yeah.
embrace AI. I feel like especially like Theo building T3 chat, that was like pretty big for a lot of people to be like, okay, like people who obviously are senior devs and can code themselves are finding a lot of use out of LLMs, because the original conversation was like, oh, they hallucinate, they're trained on stale data, they only give you broken, crappy code. There's no reason a senior dev would ever use this. That was like overwhelmingly the conversation throughout all of 2023. And I was vibe coding like all throughout that entire time. And I'm like, you guys are tripping. This is great. And then 2024, more people started picking it up. And I feel now that we're in, Q2 of 2025, like the tide is totally shifted. And I feel like most legit senior devs now are saying, regardless of what drawbacks these LLMs have, it'd be stupid not to try and adopt it in some respect for some part of your workflow,
Yeah, and I would tend to agree on that, but then I I joined this company Solvio, and they have a lot of like AI stuff in their website as well. So I joined thinking that okay, these guys are already all like bought in on AI, and then I start talking about how I use Cursor, and they're like, yeah, I tried using Copilot a little bit here and there, it didn't quite work, so I'm not spending too much time there. So like from the Twitter sphere, it does feel like a lot of people who know what they're doing are switching to a lot of these AI tools, but that's still within the Twitter sphere. It feels like
I should
like
caveat that
yeah,
it's still the type of people who are into new tech and who would have been the
right.
type of people who were trying out new frameworks back in the
Yeah.
day. So you're totally right about that. You go to any enterprise, company, and I'm sure very few people are using it, and there's all sorts of red tape around it and crap like that.
Yeah, which
That's
puts us
good.
to a big advantage.
Yeah, it shows that we're still early. Cool. Hey,
What's up?
hey. It looks like a lot of these people are coming in from your stream. Sweet. Let's get some screen sharing going. I'm gonna try and keep the chat open here while I got this guy. So first thing I want to do is just so we can all kind of be on the same page. I just want to kind of step through a bit of the docs and read some of their definitions for it. We kind of set our own context here. I think this will be useful for people as well. So this is model context protocol.io. And it says here, MCP is an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to LLMs. And I find that's pretty interesting. Those are the two keywords, model and context. Most people know what a model is. Context can be a bit of a squishier word, because when I think of context, I think of, what is the conversation you have already had with the LLM, or what are you putting in like your first message that you give to it. I had my buddy Eric Michaud on a previous episode, and he confirmed to me that the term in context learning is correct the way I've been using it, that you can just slap a huge message to it right in the beginning that kind of preloads things like docs and examples. And something I have been really getting a ton of mileage out of is this thing called repo mix, which will take your project and kind of shove it into a single file that you can use in context. It's kind of like an LLM.txt, but not exactly.
Right.
So when people use that term, they're kind of talking about something that's also giving links, so it can like reach out to the internet to understand different things. This is more of what I think an LLM.txt should be, where it's just a single file that you copy paste into your chat. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of context.
I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on just this approach of like LLMs.txt. Like it doesn't seem like something that would scale with a bunch of docs or a large code base. Like, or even if it even if you could fit it in the context, it would just make the responses really, really slow, wouldn't it?
It really depends. Like you said, it is a very big factor is how big are your docs, how big is your project. So I kind of hit a point with Auto Show where I was starting to have trouble fitting the whole code base in context, and I've like now decoupled out the CLI from the server and the web, so I can kind of develop each of them individually in a way where, and then as they grow, eventually I'll have to figure out another solution for that. But Auto Show is a pretty large project at this point, a pretty decent sized code base. So also another thing to think about is that the context window continues to get bigger. When GPT 3.5 first came out, you could fit like 4,000 tokens or something totally ridiculous. Gemini in particular gets up to the hundreds of thousands of tokens. So I have definitely leaned very heavily into this approach and very heavily away from things like vector databases. I think if you're working with something like Ryan GPT, where I have like 500 hours of transcripts, obviously that's not going to fit into context. So there's definitely there's a threshold you'll hit where this will stop making sense at a certain point. But what I like about Repo Mix is that you can kind of configure it so you cut out like your test files and your config files and like all this stuff that's kind of tokens that you don't really need. If you just keep it to like your SRC and like your main logic, then you can get pretty far with that. So I'm of the opinion that as context windows get larger and larger and larger, there will be very few code bases that aren't going to be able to work in this approach. And those will be things like if you're working at a company like GitHub, like obviously GitHub's whole code base has to be millions of lines of code, or Google's code base. Like Google had to build their own specific tooling so that people could work with it. But I think your average dev building their own stuff, you can get pretty far with this approach.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I fully agree that for a lot of the smaller projects that I work on, it's completely fine to shove it all in the context. But I feel like, I do agree that context windows are going to get bigger, but I feel like maybe the cost of that many tokens and how slow the AI, I guess not even the slow AI responses, but mostly the cost of passing that much token context back and forth versus the cost of just running like a vector search. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, I think, for how this pans out.
Yeah, that's true. If you're someone who's paying by the token, or you're using an API, or you're hooking into something like Cursor, this is one of the reasons why I like my approach, because I'm on the $200 plan with ChatGPT, and you're not paid by the token, and you have essentially unlimited tokens that you can do. So that's not really an issue for me the way I'm doing it. And if you can afford the $200 a month, then you're not really going to hit that limitation. But you're right that for a lot of people, the input cost can get prohibitive at a certain point. Input tokens are much cheaper than output tokens. So there is some wiggle room there, but depending on your own setup and how you're financing your LLM use, that can be an issue, definitely.
Okay, so long discussion on long context windows. Let's move. What else is here?
Yeah, so it's saying that MCP is like USB-C port for an AI application. So, everyone used to have a computer with like 8 different plugs for all this different crap, and now a lot of stuff is being standardized, just a single plug, and a lot of people had to be dragged kicking and screaming to that world. But I think a lot of us probably like that world better. At least I do. I like having less cables.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah. Okay, so this is important. there's MCP hosts, clients, and servers. So in the tutorial we're going to do today, it's going to be entirely an MCP server built with Node.js. So we're not going to deal with clients at all. And I think you asked me about desktop right before we started. So I'm assuming you were referring to the MCP hosts.
Okay, I don't think I ever got to this part. I'm curious, what's the difference between a host and a client? Protocol clients maintain one connection to the server. Okay, so a host has a bunch of different MCP clients. Okay, but a host is the complete application, like Cloud Desktop or Cursor. Okay, I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about the hosts and not as much about servers, because that's the part where I feel like there is so much kind of untapped potential. But yeah, today I think it's a good idea to focus on the server just to get a kind of shared understanding of what MCP even is.
Yeah, this is why I think if we end up wanting to do more multi-part series would be cool. The way I'm kind of thinking about, at least just based, I haven't dove into the hosts at all yet, but the way I'm kind of thinking of it is like hosts are like Electron apps, clients are React apps, and servers are Node apps in the JavaScript terminology.
So I think it's more like the host can be both an Electron app or a React app, and the client is the JavaScript class, the class or the object that talks to a single MCP server. That's what I'm like. It says protocol clients maintain one-to-one connection with servers, and obviously an MCP host can talk to a bunch of different servers. So it's more like you're going to have a bunch of, like, for every MCP server, you have one MCP client, and that client is embedded inside a host. That's what I'm getting from this.
You're probably right. I don't entirely understand what you're saying, but you're almost definitely right, and I'm probably wrong. So this is something that I'll have to learn more about.
I mean, you can think of it as a GraphQL server, a GraphQL client, and then a GraphQL application. So Facebook.com is a host, but it's embedding a GraphQL client that talks to a GraphQL server.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does in theory, yeah.
It's a confusing terminology. We can forget about hosts. I think that should make the discussion easier and just go with a client and a server.
Yeah, totally. And then,
I think the reason that they make this distinction is because an MCP server can also be an MCP client itself. So like you can take a bunch of different MCP servers, write some code that talks to all of them, and expose your logic as an MCP server itself. So kind of like orchestrator, or like if you think about microservices, they have patterns like this. But I think that's the reason they make this distinction is because clients can be anywhere, but hosts are like consumer apps. But for our purposes, we don't have to worry about that distinction. Let's just go with an MCP server and an MCP client app like Cloud Desktop.
Yeah, and someone's saying here, I mean, my Node server can make fetch requests. Yeah. So that's like your client being kind of embedded in your server.
Yes, yeah. So the thing that's making the fetch request is the client, and then the entire application is the host.
Okay, cool. That's great. Okay, so last link, and then we'll get into the code. So this is the TypeScript SDK, and this is kind of what I'm using to build up the tutorial. So it's got a little quick start here. We'll be building something fairly similar to this example we see here, but it's going to kind of go step by step and build up each piece. So the more important terminology, actually, I do want to go back here, and we should talk about the difference between resources and prompts. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So so these are kind of the two, and then tools also. But tools is something that if you've been using things like tool calling, and things like the Vercel AI SDK or even just the OpenAI SDK, that's a bit of more easy term to understand. The resource is not complicated, but more involved because it includes a whole bunch of stuff. So this is things like your file system, a database, your APIs, screenshots or images, log files. So this is, this is the stuff that makes it very internet-y, very web, because it's similar. You look at this. This is almost like an HTTP, HTTPS link. You got your protocol, host, and path. So this is pretty cool. This was fairly intuitive to me when I was first learning this.
For sure, yeah. I think as resources is where the distinction between MCP being for AI models versus MCP being for AI applications really kind of shines, because obviously a model can use a tool to fetch data and put it in its context, but that doesn't help us using Cursor or using Claude Desktop to really figure out what are the different pieces of data that are in the context right now. Like, we can see the data in the prompt, but that's kind of about it. Like, whatever data is fetched by the model, it's going to be in the prompt, and we have to scroll to see what data was used here. Maybe it doesn't show, and there's no standardized kind of representation of that. So I think resources are really important for the application that you're using, like the client or the host, whatever you want to call it. It's very important for that application to show, okay, here are these here's the exact data that we are using right now. So instead of that being through the prompt that you have to scroll to see, like, you can exactly see these are the resources, this is the URL for each resource, and this is what's included in the context right now. And that also means you can control it yourself, or you can attach resources, you can remove resources, or the model can automatically figure out what resources to attach. At least this is the way that I've been thinking about resources and how they differentiate from just tools fetching data.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's showing an example here. There's a direct resource. Servers expose a list of concrete resources via the resource list. This is one of the first things we'll do in the tutorial is run this. And you have your unique identifier for the resource. URI, similar to a URL. Even URI is I think can refer to it's like a more general term than URL. Yeah. And then you have name, just name, description, and then MIME type. So that is all pretty standard stuff. And then prompts is just like, people would expect. A prompt is what you're sending to the LLM itself. Accepts dynamic arguments, include context from resources, chain multiple interactions, guide specific workflows. So like since your service as UI elements like / commands. So have you used Claude Code at all?
I have not.
Yeah, so I used it once. It was cool. It didn't quite fit my workflow, what I was trying to do, but it seems pretty legit. I would recommend at least giving it a try. They use / commands, so I think I'm assuming, because Anthropic created MCP originally, and Anthropic is the creators of Claude. So I'm assuming Claude Code is like the killer app for MCP, at least from Anthropic's point of view. I could be totally incorrect.
Claude Desktop is supposed to be the one. But yeah, Claude Code is like the more developer-oriented version of that. But from their perspective, Claude Desktop is supposed to be like the flagship MCP client.
Interesting. So is Claude Desktop just the Claude.ai running in a desktop app? Because that's what
basically
Desktop is.
Basically, yeah. Okay. But because it runs on your desktop, it can talk to like MCP servers that you have running locally. Like we are still probably like a few years away, not a few years, a few months away from remote MCP servers being super mainstream, and at which point we don't have to worry about these like desktop apps being the only way to use MCP.
Yeah, I tried ChatGPT Desktop when it first came out, which I think was like about a year ago now. And it didn't seem like it was actually any different than just like using the web app. It was like, using like the Discord app versus just running Discord in your browser. That may have changed now, but the idea that like Claude Desktop actually being connected to your local file system like that actually makes a lot of sense. It would be very useful.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I do custom Artificial YouTubes. Yeah, I don't know, man. Thanks for joining, but not really interested.
Hey, we can do. ChatGPT has gotten really good at custom art these days.
Yeah, and the new, because I used to have a lot of trouble creating thumbnails with the old image model, but it's right now can definitely can do some pretty legit stuff. I actually give because the tech it can actually like spell words now, which was kind of a problem in the past.
Yeah, it's really funny. We did an entire stream on AI image gen, and then like what a couple of weeks later, ChatGPT just changed the entire game.
I mean, they did and they didn't. Now that it's available for the API, which just came out today, everything we did,
nice.
we just got to switch out the model name. So we're totally good to go. And someone's asking in the chat about open control. Yeah, so this is, we mentioned DAX and SST, you know. So I haven't tried this out yet, but it, you know, I think everything they do is like highly legit and just intrinsically worth checking out. So I definitely would recommend people, if they're interested in this kind of stuff, this is a big project to look at. So we see here, this is, you know, they're kind of set up. They have an MCP server in the middle that connects to your database and your API. And then they got like your models connected to a generate endpoint. So this seems pretty sweet. Honestly, I should have looked at this for the stream because I couldn't find a really good MCP template to use, but this actually is exactly what I want because it is just using like a Hono server and stuff, which is really nice.
Yeah, so open control is probably the closest thing to what I'm hoping to build. Even to the point where if you scroll up to the issues tab, I basically took all the ideas that I had in my head that I wanted to implement, and I opened them as issues here. So literally, if these are the 4 things that if they are added to open control, that's basically what I wanted to build. Like that's literally all that I have in my head.
Very
like
cool.
This is my ideal AI tool. Open control plus these features.
And I just find it funny, these are all by default assigned to DAX, so DAX has to read all your issues.
Yeah, Jay, that was Jay. It looks like I opened them last week, but yeah, Jay assigned them to Dax a couple days ago.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, no, this is great stuff. I should actually see if I can get Dax on stream to talk about this. That would be great.
Yeah, I've been chatting with Dax a lot, like about MCP and all, like a lot of the stuff for the last couple of months. Basically, since they launched Open Control, because that was another one where like it was another moment like Theo releasing T3.chat. Like it's a like a category or a community of senior open source people who are suddenly now fully bought into AI.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's social proof, you know. Let me clean up some tabs here. Okay. Okay, I think that's probably enough throat clearing, as they say. Can get into the actual thing here. So actually, I can just open this all the way. So I'm going to start just by showing like the project setup. We don't have to necessarily step through exactly the tutorial, but the first step is, so actually first let me just do the package.json. So our dependencies here, we have the model context protocol SDK and OpenAI, and then your TypeScript kind of stuff. So
typical.
At some point, I'm using Zod, which I'm not sure why that's actually working, even though I haven't imported it. So that's weird. But this whole thing works. So strange.
It's possible the MCP SDK depends on Zod, so it's like by default in there.
That would make a lot of sense because I basically just created this by dropping in the README.
OpenAI. No, OpenAI depends on Zod. Yes, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't answer the question though, because the first iteration of this did not have the OpenAI SDK.
Okay.
So I think you're more correct. That applies more to do with MCP because the OpenAI thing only comes into step 5. It's not right. I wasn't using it before, but this is not super important. So for
it's fine. Half of the ecosystem depends on Zod these days.
For real, man. Zod took over. Okay, so a lot of the stuff here is kind of stuff we already talked about, so we can kind of skip the intro to the tutorial. And also, after I kind of like went through all this, I realized that I didn't really do it quite in the right order, because the way this works is it doesn't take until step 4 that actually builds a server and it uses the Express app. And this part we're not actually going to get to in the tutorial at all. So what I would like to do is kind of rework this and have step 1 give you an endpoint, because the way it's actually set up is, let me show this. So when you actually run the server for this first one, it literally just hangs, and then you throw JSON directly into it to get responses, which is like obviously a terrible dev experience. So I actually want to have it give you an endpoint that you can curl, but that's just for time constraints. I wasn't able to get there. So I just want to show here, you just start the server and you hit it, and this is step 1. So this is not even using, and there's no resources, there's no prompts. This is literally just how you can run the server, period. And I'm gonna just kind of step through the actual tutorial code from here, because the JSON will be formatted a little nicer. But
I think this is like, I think this kind of like tutorials on top of MCP or like learning resources, I think something like Open Control has a lot of potential there. Because like first of all, they set up all the infrastructure needed to run the MCP server over HTTP, and the second thing is that they have an embedded client, so you don't actually like once you start running your server, it also opens a like mini AI chat app that you can use to talk to the tools that you have defined, which really like takes away a bunch. Like you don't have to paste JSON into the terminal to talk to it. You just actually use prompts. I think the learning resources around MCP, the tutorials are going to evolve a lot, thanks to things like Open Control. But yeah, that's for the future.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and this is one of the things, we're on the bleeding edge right now. So that's why we're kind of showing like really, really what is happening at the model context layer. And as these actually get more servery, then we'll get more of the niceties that we expect from like a JavaScript server,
Exactly, yeah. So like most people, these are details that we are going over that most people will not have to worry about in the near future. But it's helpful from like a technical perspective to know what's going on.
Yeah, so Open Control, is going to be like, the next to the MCP's reactor or whatever analogy you want to use,
Don't
as
tell
much
that.
as to accident that analogy. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this was what we actually sent to it. So this is JSON RPC. You have an initialize method, and you're just kind of saying, hey, here's the thing. And the response back is just saying, hey, here's the thing. You have a server, here's the version, no other information whatsoever. So what you really want is you want some resources and some prompts. So now we do, once you initialize the server, then you set server.resource, and then this is creating our hello world resource. And this is creating a URI here. So this is what we were looking at before. We were saying this is kind of like a URL, and all it's going to do is just return the text hello from your MCP resource. So someone's asking me, please explain what this is about. Yeah, so we're explaining MCP. We just kind of did like a whole half-hour explanation of what that is. So we're not going to do all of that again, but you're welcome to check out the recording once it's posted.
Yeah, and you're welcome to put any specific questions that you have as well, and we'll try to answer those.
Yeah, cool. So we're defining 2 resources here. The first is just going to give you back this text like so. So, static kind of answer. And then the second one is more like feeding in parameters. So you can give it a message. So you want to say echo, some message, and then it's going to give it back to you. So this is nice.
Yeah, it's literally like routing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is like creating your routes. So that's pretty sweet, because anyone who's worked with, Node.js servers, all this code should be pretty comprehensible and pretty simple. You see here, if you echo test, then you'll get back the word test. And then lastly is the prompt. So this is going to then have us accept a question that could be fed to like an LLM. So it says, could you answer this question for me? And then it gives it the question that you're giving it, and it's named as the ask question. So this here is just explaining kind of what we just explained there. And then a couple things you can do. You can list your resources here. Now, I'm not sure why this is happening. It's only listing one of the two resources I defined. So I need to figure out why that is. But both resources do actually work. So when you do resources list, you may also see that. I'm still figuring out why exactly that is. But then you can also list
I think it's because the resource that you have with the template, like with the dynamic parameter that you put in, it needs, you see it has the list undefined. So the list undefined tells the server that it doesn't have a way to list the echo resources. So this is where you pass in another hook, that another function that returns a list of the resources you want to give the model.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the template thing I hadn't even seen until we were just looking through this. So the UI template.
That's not it. That's just the template standard. It should be, if you look for list in this. It's definitely in here somewhere because I've implemented that listing a resource template. Let me look for that as well.
Here we go, list available resources. I need to develop some skills, so I am at right place.
Oh, it's on the GitHub.
On the GitHub.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on the GitHub.
They do the same thing in their example here. That's why this ended up into my example.
Right. Did they have a separate example where they actually define the list?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
But to answer
so
this
I don't
question
remember
in
where
the chat, this is not important. We can move on from this, but just to answer this in the chat, if you're just a teenager and you don't know a whole lot about coding, this may be a bit confusing. You're welcome to stick around though, because when I was learning to code, I listened to many conversations that made no sense to me, and I feel like in the long run they were useful. But yeah, if you're looking for like some very, very beginner resources, I would ask ChatGPT to explain things to you. That's honestly the best way to learn things these days.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep on moving here. So the way you actually use these things. So let's just get this guy running just so we can kind of see it in action. So this is now step 2 that we've defined our lists. If we want to get our hello world back, we can do that. We see this message here, hello from your MCP resource. And now if we want to do this, we do testing 1 2 3, get testing 1 2 3 back. If we change that to testing, testing 4 5 6, we would get testing 4 5 6 back.
Yeah, the TypeScript SDK is not super well developed and documented at all. So there's a bunch of different things.
I noticed.
Yeah.
I think there was some breaking changes as well. Because when I originally had it vibe code me out this first tutorial, the first requests were broken because they were using some old feature. So I'm assuming it pulled that from the docs, but maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. And list undefined. If I remember running into this, and I probably just it's a good thing that it's TypeScript, because I could just figure out based on the type signature that what this should look like, and because clearly there's no documentation for it.
Yeah, I had issues getting logging to work as well. So this is where we're super early here. So anyone who's like, oh, MCP is already a hype thing and it's too late, it's this is so early. If you want to become an MCP expert, you are well within the first 1% of devs who will know anything about this. So now this is our prompt. So I asked and this is funny, I didn't write this, but what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? I'm curious. Was this from the original docs? No, it was not. Just ChatGPT just felt the need to write that. That's funny. And then we see here in the text, could you answer this question? Line breaks. What's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Cool. So now we still have our resources and our prompts, but now we have a tool. So
before we go to tools,
yeah, sure.
What do you think about prompts as part of the server? Like, is there a, like, that's probably the one thing that other, REST, GraphQL, the things that people say this is what we should use instead. Like, they don't have a concept of prompts. So what are your thoughts around that? What are prompts and why are they important?
So I think it makes sense to make it its own primitive, because the reason why prompts don't exist in like the HTTP world when people are just working with the APIs is because for the most part, you had to learn what is the difference between like a system prompt and a user prompt. And then you'd have to construct your code in a way where your prompt would be essentially the text that the endpoint receives, and then it inserts that into your prompt. And then you could also build all this kind of logic around, dynamic prompts that accept different parameters and things like that. And, it made sense not to have a primitive around it in that respect, because it already is what you're building everything around. Like, that is how you're interacting with the AIs. You send it prompts and you get responses back. So now that we're in this world where we have other stuff, where we have things like resources and tools, it doesn't make any sense to just also have prompts in the mix, but it just being something where you have to figure out how your prompt is going to get into the context and, interact with the tools and the resources. So to me, it makes sense why it's a primitive for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I think of it almost as a halfway step towards AI agents. Not in that AI agents is going to replace it, but it's more like, how agents are designed to be single purpose, like they have a very specific functionality and they have all the and they're like prompt engineered in a very specific way to achieve that task. I feel like that's kind of the role that these prompts are supposed to fill, where like if there's some complicated piece of task, I don't want to have to figure out what's the best prompt that I can give the AI to achieve this one task. So instead, there's a library of prompts that I can use that either understand the task very well, or they understand the data that like the resources or the tools that are available to achieve a task, or some combination of both. So for example, if I was writing an email MCP client, like for Gmail or Outlook, then I would have a bunch of prompts specifically around like handling emails or looking through email chains to find some information, or coming up with a professional sort of follow-up or a reply to something. So like these are things that I would just put as detailed prompts, and then the user doesn't have to figure out how to exactly prompt the AI to achieve that certain task.
No, I totally agree. And this is exactly how I built Auto Show, where I built all of these prompts. And then I even separate my prompt into two different things, an instruction and example. And then I have like, I want titles, I want a summary, I want chapters. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And this is why I created the concept of a prompt primitive within Auto Show. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So with something like this, an application like AutoShow could also just be an MCP server that I can use using any client, because it's a set of prompts, it's a set of ways to interact with data, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and the resources would then be YouTube videos or audio files on your computer or things like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or even the markdown files that you generate at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, there's a ton of potential there. And once, maybe like 6 months, once the MCP has been built out more, I may think about trying to create some sort of, integration with AutoShow, because there's definitely a ton of overlap. I just think that the tech is still pretty new, that not quite sure about putting it in production yet. Okay, so we can go to tools now. Yeah, tools. So tools were really confusing to me, honestly. Like back when I first heard the
Mhm.
term, like a year ago when I was first starting to do more AI streams, I did one with my buddy Monarch, and he built this framework called Ragged, which was a lot of it was based around tool use, and so I started to understand it kind of better from with him. I like the example here because it's like dumbass simple. This tool is literally just going to add numbers together. So really is kind of just like, when they say business logic, that's kind of how
Mhm.
it's working here. The tool kind of also can refer to things like reaching out to like internet search, like that's a really common tool, or like getting the weather API, or things like that. Because with the AI SDK from Vercel lets you do tool
Mhm.
use, tool
Yeah, they
calling.
have the classic example of the AI doesn't know the weather, but it can call the tool to figure out the weather of in a location. Oh, there you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's all good. So tools now make perfect sense to me. But when I first heard the term, it was a little
Yeah.
confusing. But
Yeah, it's always confusing with things that are so generic. Like it's
yeah,
literally
like
like
it's a
AI calling a
tool.
function. It can do so many things, and it's hard to think of like specific cases where that would help. It
Yeah.
almost reminds me of AWS Lambda, where it's such a generic tool that it took us a few years to figure out what to do with them.
No, I totally agree. Lambdas were so confusing to me at first until I was literally just like, oh, you mean it's just like an endpoint that like
Yeah.
runs Node? Cool. Yeah. So now we see here, this is a bit more involved because now we have like a whole schema. This is also probably
Mhm.
where Zod is super useful because we have we have an A and a B, both of which are numbers that we're
Mhm.
going to add together. So we see here we're actually getting like an input schema with an object and properties being A and B, which each are type
Mhm.
number, and they're both required because obviously you can't add two numbers together if you only have one of them. And then they're even giving us like the JSON schema link here. Is this link actually
Mhm.
going to work? Let's see. Yeah. So do you use like if you use like JSON RPC much?
No, it's something that I have been vaguely familiar of for a while, um, but it's like MCP is probably the like a really driving the adoption of JSON RPC these days. Like
Yeah.
it's something that we've always had better alternatives to. Like we've always
Yeah.
had the ability to do either GraphQL, TRPC, gRPC. So
Or
JSON
just raw
schema
dog and
is
JSON like an actual dev.
exactly, yeah, exactly, yeah. So like
Yeah.
we are either like in too simplistic, too fast moving category to use any sort of RPC layer, or just use GraphQL. Like why settle for a middle, uh, like a mid range choice, I guess. Like you either don't pick an RPC layer or to pick the best one.
Yeah. Well, I want to put a pin in GraphQL and talk about that a bit later. The only
Yeah.
experience, well, just because I it's mentioned on a podcast that I was listening to with Brian Douglas, where he was talking about MCP, and I think it's interesting. The only experience I'd had with JSON schema and JSON RPCs prior to this was Dash, actually the cryptocurrency that I work with.
Mhm.
They also have their whole platform is built around JSON schema. And so I kind of like, if you've used JSON, like JSON schema is
Yeah.
not going to be very complicated to figure out,
Mhm.
but there's some very specific, like all these requests that we've been sending all have like JSON RPC
Yeah.
2.0 in the request because you have to make sure they
Mhm.
know what schema you're using and that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And they come back in a very specific format, and then they usually include things like these schema links that like explain, so it's very self-referential, which is
Yeah.
probably really good for, I imagine this is very useful for LLMs to have all this stuff very clearly defined.
Yeah. And at this, thanks to MCP, I think every schema validation library is building like an official way to convert their schemas into JSON schemas. Like with Zod, I was using an external library. The new release of Zod just built it in like native. Hey, take a Zod schema, convert it to JSON schema, and use it wherever.
I think Titanium just joined the stream. What's up, man? I just actually had a call last week with Dan. I don't know if you've talked to him since the events,
I haven't talked in a while.
He's doing well. He was doing very well, I think, and he's
I'm very happy to hear that.
Been on a good path. So he
happy
had said
to
that.
Join.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining, Dan. Okay, so right now, so this tool, you just add two numbers together. So this is going to add 10 and 32, which will give us back 42. So
nice.
That's nice and simple. Okay, so this step 4 ended up kind of being stupid because the logging didn't work, and the SE transport I didn't actually get to, and then the review code I didn't implement. So actually, I'm going to skip this step entirely because I need to kind of refactor this part of the tutorial, but that's okay because no one gives a crap. We want to actually use a freaking LLM. This is what we're here for. Like, let's use an LLM. Okay, so step 5. This is the most important. I'm just going to go into my terminal or my editor for this now. So the most important thing, obviously, you got to have your API key for this. This bothered me for some reason. You cannot use the built-in Node.js --env-file thing. For some reason, I couldn't get it to work. I had to actually use .env. So that's just like a weird bug for some reason that I could not figure out. But anyway, if we kind of look at this tool, this is the goods right here. So chat completion endpoint. This is this is the bread and butter. This is what I was talking about before, about how you have your system prompt and you have your user prompt. So this is the type of code. This is all the stuff I've been writing with auto show. And the awesome thing about the completion APIs is pretty much been standardized. Like Anthropic has like a messages API, which is a little bit different. But if you're using, Grok, if you're using Mistral, if you're using, I think, Cohere, I don't know about Gemini, but a lot of the other LLM providers basically just ported the exact endpoint that ChatGPT has here.
Of course.
So yeah. And that's it. So you see here, this is not a whole lot of code to get our LLM connected, which is really nice. So,
I mean, everything is cross-pollinating, right? I was very happy to see that when OpenAI finally released MCP support for their APIs as well.
Yeah, and I bet there was a lot of pushback from some people internally because it was built by, their main competitor, and there's a lot of weird kind of bad blood between the two companies. Because there's people who kind of jump ship from OpenAI to create Anthropic. That's at least what my buddy Eric was telling me, and he's very much on the inside track with this kind of stuff. But
and they have a Claude Code competitor now.
Oh yeah, oh that's right, they do. Yeah. Do you know what it's called?
I forget. That.
Codex. I think that's it. Wait, no, that's not it.
No, that's that's not the thing.
That was old. Actually, Codex Coding Agent. Codex CLI, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, probably that.
Yeah, this is it. Lightweight coding agent that runs in your terminal. Yeah, because that's pretty much what I got from Claude Code. Is it's like a term. It's basically just like a terminal thing. Obviously, it can interact with your code base, but it's not really like Cursor because it's doing a lot of stuff. It's for people who like really love Vim. I bet it's great.
For sure.
For me, it didn't quite feel like the right layer of abstraction for what I'm doing.
Yeah, for me, I like to stick either just in my editor like Cursor or a web app.
Yeah, and Dan, so it's for not necessarily sending data. Well, it is for sending data to LLMs. That's a good way to put it. It's for both sending data to LLMs and just letting LLMs access your data, and then also just access like other services broadly. So it's kind of like a glue layer between lots of different pieces. Like if we look at the MCP server examples, I think this is actually really illustrative. That it's not necessarily like it's stuff like Google Drive and GitHub and Puppeteer, Slack, Google Maps. Like it's all sorts of stuff, Cloudflare, is Electric Beanstalk or no? I'm not sure what that is. Prisma. Stripe. So yeah, so the idea being that it's something that both lets LLMs talk to data, but also lets everyone kind of standardize around this one protocol that lets all these applications talk together. And so that's why, going back to what we had first talked about, some people saying, why not just build a REST endpoint? It's like, well, you're going to build a REST endpoint that integrates with every single thing you see on this list? Like, no, of course not. That's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, you can also think of it as it's for sending data to LLMs and for LLMs to send data to the outside world.
Yeah. Okay, so gotcha. So if you have my MCP in your app, you can swap out ALM that supports it.
Yes, the user can swap out any LLM and any an LLM-based application. So you can go between Cursor and Claude Desktop and Claude Code and really any other application that supports MCP or that's considered an MCP host.
Yeah, switching out the apps is especially the big thing, because what I did in AutoShow is I just built some utility functions that call different endpoints, and that wasn't very hard. Like switching out different models and different LLM providers, especially if you're sticking with like the completions kind of endpoint, is not very challenging actually. So it's a good use case, but it's really not the killer use case for MCP. It's really about all the different applications that you can now kind of combine with each other. Okay, so here's
and in terms of the MCP host, the ability to switch out different models is probably going to be more relevant if you can like make that decision smartly. Like if you can somehow figure out if a certain response issue, if a certain prompt or a certain request should go to a smaller model for faster response, or should it go to a reasoning model based on the like that. This is something that I've been thinking out for the last couple of days, because I saw that tweet about, hey, please stop saying thank you and sorry, you're wasting a bunch of GPU hours.
Yeah, so it's like, just send the thank you to GPT 3.5,
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for me also, it's useful in AutoShow because I think it's useful to surface the different model choices to the user, because it's a credit-based system. So you can kind of show them directly, here's a cheap model, here's an expensive model, choose which one. It makes more sense for what you're trying to do right now.
Exactly, yeah. And or maybe a combination of both. Like, hey, figure out if this should go to a more expensive model. Ask the user for, hey, do you want to switch to a reasoning model for this request?
Yeah, there's something called Open Router that I know is kind of also. Yeah. So this is
what T3 Chat is using behind the scenes.
Yeah, I thought that might be the case. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we see here, I sent this request with a prompt saying, write me a short poem about doing the doodly-doo. Because I like whimsy in my tutorials. So, in the quiet of the afternoon's hue, we gather around for the doodly-doo. A whimsical dance, the playful step, circles and twirls as spirits are kept.
No, I'm not doing the screen.
Yeah, he said he got confused because he's watching on your channel.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing the stream. Yeah. We're going on both of our channels right now. We're combining our powers. We're putting the rings together. Yeah. So that's my whole tutorial. So cool. How was that? How did that did that help elucidate some concepts for you?
Give me a second. Yeah, no, that's
by the way, we're both wearing Netlify shirts right now. This is my remix Netlify shirt.
We're doing a tutorial review, kind of. I mean, it was a pretty quick tutorial review. Some of it was
it's a crappy tutorial. I'm gonna have to do some work on, but yeah, this is like the first. I've found this new kind of rhythm where I like building. Or I vibe code a tutorial and then I go through it on stream with someone, and then I kind of find the places to iron it out, and then I'm going to publish this probably in like a week or so. So Dan, if you want to go back and watch this guy and then give me notes, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good, like very bare bones introduction to MCP. It shows like not only what it's kind of about, like how to define things for the models, but like also like how to interact with it on a technical level. I think the major missing point.
Hey, go ahead. Sorry. you should monologue on this. I want to go off screen for like 2 minutes to use the bathroom, so I want to keep going. So you fill time while I'm doing that.
Yeah. So I think the major point about MCP that's kind of been missing that I brought up like at least a couple more times, which is that how it's different from things like REST APIs or GraphQL. And like obviously the big major difference is that it's meant for LLMs. What that means is that you don't define your tools and resources the exact same way that you would define your REST API endpoints. Like adding descriptions is like one indicator of that. Like you don't add descriptions to your REST endpoints. You do them for the documentation, but here the descriptions are a very core part of what your tool can do. Like it very much decides when the model decides to call that tool or to use that resource, or when the user decides to like bring that resource in, or how the model understands that resource. So the descriptions are no longer something just for documentation that can be ignored or that can like be an afterthought. It becomes like a core interface to the tool. And in a similar way, because we are not writing code to interact with these tools and resources, we are just handing them to our models. They also have to be designed a little differently. Like you cannot just have a one-to-one mapping between your REST endpoints and your MCP tools. You have to really try to encode workflows and use cases and a bunch of different things into these tools. So how to write an MCP server. This is a great tutorial for that. But I think at some point we're going to need a next level, which is how to write a good MCP resource, or how to write a good MCP server that you can bring into client and actually make your life easier, rather than having to school the AI about how this MCP server works, what are the different tools you should use in different situations. I don't know how much sense that monologue makes.
No, that made perfect sense. I think this tutorial, it is really good for helping you understand the terminology and the concepts and things like that. But it very much feeds into what we started the stream talking about, which is that someone will look at this and be like, why the hell don't you just build a normal ass server? Like, that's all it's doing. And that's the same, critique people would have, like, the Redwood tutorials, like, why are you building a blog? You wouldn't use Redwood to build a blog. Well, it's like, well, it's a learning resource, people, but I'm really glad you said that, though. I think that's super, super useful, because I want to think of, how do I take this to the next step, and what would actually be useful. And I like what you said about the descriptions. And this is what I just love about LLMs and this new paradigm we're getting into, is that natural language is becoming so much more important to the whole process. And you're able to talk to things like a person, and it makes things more human. It makes them more approachable to beginners. It's just like such a good thing across the board. So I think it's a really interesting thing to kind of key in on.
Yeah, exactly. I think like if I like the kind of tutorial that I'm picturing in my head, it would be something where you would define a tool and then immediately hop into like an AI app and say something that's more natural to what you would say in a daily routine, or what, like, how you interact with people, how you interact with computers, with chatbots, or like kind of your some part of your workflow, and then seeing if the AI can figure out that it should call this tool that you just defined. So it's not just about that, hey, go and call this tool. It's more about, here's something that I'm doing. Based on this prompt, can you figure out that you need to call this tool, and can you figure out what parameters you should call this tool with? And then if it doesn't call that, then go back to your tool definition, update the description, the schemas, and do that until the description is smart enough, or the AI is smart enough that it can take a natural interaction and figure out what tools to call. So maybe that's how. And same thing with resources. Like you just define kind of the general thing that you're looking for, and see if the AI is able to figure out what are the correct resources that it should fetch. And the other good thing is, once you're writing your resources and tools, you can just ask AI to give you these test scenarios that, hey, give me a natural interaction that I can use to test if the AI can find the correct tools. So I've been using Cursor for this quite a bit. Like I define the tools that I have or that I'm playing with, and then I ask Cursor, hey, give me some test scenarios for this. And they're a really good way for me to figure out, does the AI know, or can the AI figure out what to do from here?
Yeah, man, so much of AI dev, as I've been getting more and more into it, is like very much the Ouroboros of like the snake eating itself, like using the AI to develop the AI. There's such a better feedback loop now. That's like really fascinating. It would not have been possible before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. So let's hit two more topics. So I listened to this podcast before the stream. My buddy B. Dougie, he's now hosting. He used to host Jamstack Radio. He now does Open Source Ready. And his last episode was about MCP. And they cover a lot of the same basics we did. They'll define what it is. Really good supplementary material for what people just watched. But there was one point, they didn't go into it very deeply, but they mentioned GraphQL. And Steve, the guest, was basically like, GraphQL has a lot of potential for this and could be pretty useful. But as far as he was seeing, he hasn't seen a lot of development on it. There's not really anyone doing it. And Brian was like, I should talk to Yuri from the guild and see if he's on the MCP train. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think, I'm not really sure. I haven't spent enough time with GraphQL to kind of figure out if that's going to be a meaningful upgrade to MCP. It probably is, just because like it's definitely going to help in terms of like if we only need a part of data. But again, resources are not really JSON. Like it could be anything. So like GraphQL is really nice for data that is structured as JSON, because you can write your queries to that similar shape. But a lot of MCP so far is like resources could be in any format. It could be a markdown file, it could be text, it could be an image file, it could be video. And GraphQL is like very much designed to handle deeply nested data, where you can like you can look at the entire structure.
Yeah,
maybe like it's definitely going to be helpful for specific scenarios where you have that kind of deeply structured data. Like if like knowledge bases, right now people are messing with like graph based data structures for AI memory, I guess. Memory is the word I was looking for. So maybe something like that, where you want to expose the entire structure of the data to the model and then let it figure out exactly what data to extract from that structure.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and Dan's saying here that Syntaxis did an MCP episode as well. And here is the link for that for anyone who is curious. I also found there is a repo with about 100 stars of someone who has built out some sort of GraphQL thing. So I'll probably clone that down and play around with it at some point. But yeah, the other thing I was just kind of curious to ask about is, you want to talk more about the AI app that you were building, and like what's the status of that? And yeah, like are you how into it? As low-key sounds like a Minecraft server. That's fine.
Yeah, if you ask right now, I think for the models that have a cutoff date of like that doesn't include the MCP burst. If you just say MCP, it's gonna think Minecraft server.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just a little bit too old to hit the Minecraft phase. I was kind of getting out of video games once it started blowing up, so don't have a lot of context on that.
Yeah, so the tool that I'm building, the first way you can think of it as like a personal assistant just that basically has access to your entire life in a way. Like I want to give this thing access to my emails, to my Slack channels, including like work, my Notion, these streams that I do, like maybe even my Twitter feed, if that becomes possible. Like basically give it as much context as possible about the kind of work that I do, the kind of my interactions with people, my personal journey. So like I write journals as well. ChatGPT has actually really upped my journaling strategy. So that's kind of the first thing, where like it's able to know everything about me and it's able to do things on my behalf. So it can write a draft email for me. It can make changes to my Notion document. It can update in like my to-do list with the things that I'm talking about. So it can do all those things. And the second thing that I was thinking of is, so right now, if you want to execute tools, uh, what I'm calling it is synchronous tool execution. It's where the model comes back, says that here I want to call this tool, and you either approve that execution or you deny that, and then it goes. If you approved it, it's going to call the tool and then move on to the next thing, or it's just going to move on to. It's not going to call the tool, right? But the point is that when the AI requests a tool execution, it just stops there until the tool is executed or denied, and then goes on to the next thing. Uh, I want to achieve asynchronous tool execution. It's where the AI says that, here, I want to call this tool, but it's immediately just like put in some sort of a queue, or like I've used the word action plan in the past, but you can think of it as just a queue, and then it moves on. So it can put a bunch of tool executions in the queue, and later when you give it a different prompt, or like for any future interactions, it's going to have that queue in context. So it's going to see it's always going to have the knowledge of all the tools that are in the queue, or all the executions, and at any point it can remove things from the queue, or it can add new things, or it can tweak the parameters. So basically you're collaborating with the AI on this like list of tool executions over time, and then you can execute them like on will. So instead of like, here, go execute this tool right now, and before I can do the next thing, it's like it's more like in a planning collaboration phase, where you come up with a huge list of things that are going to happen by the end of it, or like throughout the middle. The reason why I or the original source of inspiration for this like async tool execution was using it as like a meeting assistant. So let's say you get into like a 15-20 minute stand-up meeting with your teammates, and you're talking about the work that you did yesterday, the work you're planning on doing today, any blockers, progress updates, things like that. I wanted, like, as I say those things in the meeting, I want someone to be transcribing all of it, and then making changes to our project board, or like Trello, Jira, whatever it is. Just go and make those changes automatically, add all the progress updates, move the card tickets around, and I don't have to do any of that. I can just say that these are the things that are happening, and over time it just does those things on those boards. It can maybe schedule meetings as well, it can send emails or whatever. So those are like kind of the two things that I'm uh, hoping to build.
No, that's super sweet. That's I'm using some tool. Jen Janad had something that she hooked into our auto show meetings that doesn't do all that, but it does just listen to the meeting, gives you a summary at the end. So
Yeah.
kind of does like the first part of that whole workflow that you're describing. And that's something that auto show can do pretty easily.
Yeah.
You just have to create a meeting prompt and have it just basically listen. And then once the audio file is done, then it feeds the audio file to auto show. Also, so Dan is mentioning now wearables. There's this guy who had a necklace. I think I know what he's talking about. I don't remember what it was called, but there was something called Rabbit that was also very similar. It was a pin, not a necklace. But yeah, so is that something you're thinking about, that like you would even have like something just listening to all of your conversations as well? Because then it's like that's really next level.
Yeah.
Although, because then if you just had a meeting, you would just have to turn your computer sound on and it would always be able to listen to everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using Alexa devices for like 4 years now, so I'm honestly like very comfortable with the idea of something that has the potential of always listening in. Like obviously right now I have to trigger the Alexa, but like I could ask it, hey, turn on your mic and listen to the next hour of this conversation, and just then do whatever. So I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of wearables. I don't know. It's maybe I have to experiment more with them. I have to actually like use one for a while to figure out if
for
there's
you,
any
you have
value
enough
or not.
just devices sitting around you with microphones that it's just kind of redundant. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's the thing about wearables is more like they're slightly more accessible. Like, I don't have to hold the phone in my hand the entire time. So there's like little hardware conveniences around it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, part of me thinks, that's going to be a hard sell for a lot of people because they're going to be worried about, their data and privacy and all that. But then at the same time, it's like all of our phones are already listening to us. And I think most people have kind of accepted
Yeah.
that. So I think people complain about that, but in
Mm-hmm.
practice, they don't actually care. And they will use devices that listen to them 24/7. And then they just kind of convince themselves that it's not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of that is the one big difference. That if you explicitly buy a wearable that is supposed to listen to you all the time, it's really no different from your iPhone. But you have to
Yeah.
make that mental switch to be like,
Mm-hmm.
now I actually have to give consent to the fact that it's listening to me instead of just hoping it's not and
Yeah.
knowing in the back of my mind it probably is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if Apple would even let you as a watchOS app developer listen to the background. Yeah, I
Probably
don't know.
not.
My conspiracy brain thinks that every single one of these devices listens all the time, and just all the
Yeah.
developers at these companies are just lying to us.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you would have for that. Yeah, it's a really, really good question, Dan, and I do not know. And I try not to think about it too much because I get paranoid and weirded out when I go down these rabbit holes too deeply.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I think this is a good place to start winding down. What do you want to do for our next stream?
I mean, I want to try to get Peter on again and talk about the new direction of Redwood.
Yes, we will do that. I mean, separate from that.
Okay, separate from that, let's see. I don't know what's been something fun that you've been working on.
I mean, I'm just heads down, still building auto show, and most of the stuff that kind of feeds into that we've already done streams about. I would, since you're kind of into it, like to just dig deeper into MCP and especially open control. Is that the name of the
Yeah.
SST thing? Yeah, open control. Yeah, I think that could be cool. I think that's gonna take me past a lot of the initial blockers I had, just trying to get this hooked up to a server,
Yeah,
So
sure.
that could be fun. And then yeah, I'll have to think about it. There were some other things that I was interested in doing that are escaping me right now, but we can chat more after the fact. And yeah, do you have so for your app, are you planning on like open sourcing it or just kind of building it and then trying to like productize it? Like, where's your head at with that?
I mean, there's really no reason to not open source these things, because if I don't open source it, someone else is going to build and open source it just a few months after me. Like it's AI thing, AI ecosystem is moving so freaking fast right now. Like people who thought that they had some sort of productized version of like there are tool ecosystems or like frameworks or like JavaScript frameworks or whatever frameworks that had their own format for defining tools, and they had an ecosystem of like hundreds of different tools that work with their framework. Those existed, but now like MCP kind of just shut down that entire possible way to do business, right? So Google launched A2A protocol. I haven't looked into that much, but I'm assuming that might have similar effects. So like any business model or product idea that you could think of right now, I'm like I feel like in a few months of time, things are going to shake up to so much that that exact idea is going to be democratized, open sourced, made available for free. So there's really not a whole like open control was a great example of that. I thought I was building this tool that with my previous company, and we were going to use it internally, we were going to productize it, and then open control comes along, basically building like a very similar thing but fully open source with MIT license. And now I'm like, this is what I was building. Why is that, like this is MIT open source now? What how am I supposed to do like earn money based on my thing now? So yeah, it's almost like a folly not open sourcing things you want to build that you are building in the AI ecosystem, because chances are other people are building a very similar thing, and it's better to just like find centers of collaboration rather than like you use projects as ways to collaborate on ideas uh, rather than like build a wall that you can productize.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's exactly why I've been doing auto show totally open source. And I think the real secret sauce for most companies at this point. I think it's just going to be UX. Like it's actually building like a front end that is like really slick and easy for people to use. And then if someone just kind of like wholesale copies your front end, that's just kind of like poor form. Although I'm sure people would do it anyway, you know. But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, if you end up, you know, getting that repo going at some point, we could chat about that on stream. I also did
Sure.
I wrote a blog post for this company Semaphore, where I did kind of an agent implementation for like code review, which is actually really freaking useful because Theo just posted this a couple of days ago. Code review is an unsolved problem. I would certainly not claim that I have solved code review, but what it does is it will look at your changes, a PR or commit even, and then just say what has changed. What are the security implications? Does it make your code, you know, more maintainable, less maintainable? It just kind of gives you a whole bunch of pieces of feedback about it. And then Semaphore is a CI/CD company, but I ported it to just a GitHub action. So that could be a fun one. We can get, if we want to just, you know, schedule one for like a month out from here, we can kind of just do a grab bag episode and just hit a bunch of topics that we want to. But what's this Code Rabbit thing?
So it's the thing that you were talking about, like it's the SaaS version of that. It hooks into your GitHub and provides like in-depth PR reviews. Yeah, Theo has been using this for a while. I think they even sponsored Theo for some videos.
Okay, I should try this. And we should look at this on stream and just compare it to the open source thing that I built.
Yeah. No, so yeah, next month is gonna be a little packed. So I'm at Star Trek. I'm speaking at Star Trek at the beginning. I'm speaking at Local First Conf in Berlin, which is super exciting. We're talking about Solid.js and how it kind of integrates nicely with like the Local First ecosystem. So that's like my beginning and ending of May. And I don't think I have much going on in between, but lots of stuff happening.
We'll chat after. You can just give me like a week that's good for you, and we can find a date. And since Dan is he's mentioning just because you guys are talking about Solid, that just reminded me. Also, next time I can show you Ryan GPT, and I'll hopefully have it deployed by then and on the URL and all that, because it basically works. It works locally. I just have to like actually deploy it and get it set up.
Nice.
Yeah, dude. I built Ryan GPT. It has all of his stream transcripts. I still have to hook in his blog posts, but it's about 90% done. It's a pretty legit project, so I'm super proud of it. I can't wait to like put it out into the world.
Yeah. Once that goes out, we need Ryan to do an entire stream, or at least like 30 minutes of a stream playing with it.
I'm at least gonna get him on my own stream.
Yes.
Once we do that, and I kind of get him bought in, I'll see if I can get on his stream, because I've been on his stream to talk about Redwood, so it'd be cool to get back on again to talk about this. Because I mean, I think anyone who is into Ryan's shit should find this. Dan is the perfect second person I would want to tell about this project. So I'm really glad he's here for us to talk about it, because he knows Ryan so well. So yeah, I think we got plenty of stuff to talk about for the next episode. So cool. Yeah, unless there's anything else you want to say, we can close it off here.
Keep building cool AI stuff, and please build cool AI stuff, because we really need lots and lots of them to figure out what works.
For real, man. Yeah, no, this is the time. The time is now. And yeah, super appreciate you being in the stream, Dan. Appreciate all the other people who were here chatting earlier, and I appreciate.
Do we have enough people to rate Theo?
Oh, I mean, not on. I mean, you got 3 people on Twitch, so you can rate them from your own account if you want.
All right.
I'm going through the StreamYard interface, so yeah, go for it.
All right, give me one.
Let me know when.
Wait, what's my
live stream?
Oh, it's like I almost forgot my Twitch username. All right, let's rate Theo with 3 people, whoever's here.
Awesome.
All right, we're good.
Great. All right, we will catch you guys next time. Bye.